Thanks a million, and thanks for the invitation to be here and to speak to you, all of you. There was a colleague at my table earlier who said she felt like a gatecrasher. And as I stand up here before you after all those wonderful presentations, I feel like a bit of a gatecrasher myself. But I do feel like a very appreciative gatecrasher. And partly because there was so much promising practice shared throughout the day. Obviously highlighting the challenges around the biodiversity crisis, but really sharing the fantastic work that's happening. So I'm going to pivot it a little bit now and talk about philanthropy. And Community Foundation is a philanthropic foundation working a little bit in this area. And to quote Proncius, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about our journey and I suppose where we hope to go, our ambition, and some of our observations. And for us, the conversation is really timely because we're really trying to think through how we can partner and amplify the work that we're doing, but how we can partner people like yourselves. So I'll just talk a little bit from the outset about Community Foundation for Ireland. As I said, it's a philanthropic model, and our mission is equality for all in thriving communities. And I suppose increasingly we're 22 years in operation, and really I suppose our lens has always been inequality or equality. And increasingly we are really challenging ourselves to move in our new strategy towards equality and environment. So we think about people, planet and place. That's the kind of lens that we see the world. As I said, we're lucky enough to be around for 22 years, and in that time we've been able to give out 100 million. So it's not huge money, but it's significant sometimes in certain places if it's given in the right way. And we have about 100 donors, so they are corporates, trusts and foundations, families and individuals. And we work with about 500 organisations and communities across the Republic, and there is our counterpart in the north. So our grants fall under 4 thematic areas, and the first is inclusive communities. And inclusive communities really channels money into, I guess, really those who are feeling on the sidelines, who are feeling very disadvantaged. So we have the privilege of working with those with a migration background, whether refugee, asylum, or have migrated to Ireland. We work very closely with the travelling community, LGBT+, and other minorities who feel or experience their rights being denied, or supporting groups to protect those rights. Some examples within that context, I suppose, close to my own heart as co-founder of Marriage Equality. Before I joined Community Foundation, it would have been one of the first funders in that area. We've been able to, over the last year, develop a legal service for traveller rights. And then recently we were able to pivot and adapt to respond to those coming into communities from the Ukraine, but also in the wider context of international protection. So that's the inclusive community piece. But I suppose as we develop our own journey around environment, climate and biodiversity, of course those in the most disadvantaged areas, and everybody in this room knows this, so I'm preaching to the converted, but they're the ones that are feeling the most impact of the biodiversity or climate crisis, and maybe don't have as much voice or are doing the most innovative work. So our job now as a foundation with our donors is to work through that inclusive community lens, but putting an environmental, climate and biodiversity lens to all the work that we do in that regard. Empowering generations is the other theme that we have, and again, that's trying to ensure that all voices and all age groups are heard, particularly when we consider the future of communities and our country. And in particular, we focus on young people and older people, but it's the full life cycle from infant to older. And again, we're challenging ourselves to do that through the lens of environment, climate and biodiversity. Accelerating change allows our donors to respond to the issues of the day, and outside of the issue we're talking about today, for example, when Brexit hit, really thinking about lots of the rights that we're trying to protect across the island and the implications of Brexit on those. So we developed an all-island fund, and that allowed civil society to work together across the island, and 33 civil society partnerships were developed, and many of those were on climate, actually, not so much on biodiversity. And so then that brings us to the fourth theme that has now come the overall theme, and that is sustainable futures. So as I said, community foundations are a model. There's 1,800 of us around the world, and we're very often focused on a geographical location, no more than many of you around the room. And as I said, it is the connectivity to the organisations and communities on the ground, which is, I suppose, our raison d'etre, the reason why we do the work that we do. And when we look at the issue of environment, climate and biodiversity, and again, people probably know this, that philanthropy in Ireland is very, very underdeveloped. But philanthropy in this area is further underdeveloped. So globally, I think there's about 3% of spend or giving that goes to this context, and it's the same in the Irish context. Although recently, obviously, as again somebody said at our table, the world is burning, and so people are waking up to that fact, including those who give. And so more and more donors are interested in what they can do, and it was brilliant to hear some ideas throughout the day of where philanthropy might make a difference or might engage as a partner. Very often it can do things that maybe others can't do in terms of flexibility, risk, longer term, evidence-based. You know, there's interventions that they sometimes, philanthropy can come in and help with, and it was great to hear some of them being mentioned. So just in the Sustainable Futures work, there are kind of 3 strands to where we're at the moment before we start to realise our greater ambition. So we partner with the Environmental Protection Agency to support, reduce, reuse, recycle practices from the circular economy model. And the match fund relationship that we have really allows us to support local groups and local projects. So again, some examples are young designers trying to challenge fast fashion, doctors ending plastic waste from the inhalers, or recycling components of used mattress. There's some of the projects. So that's the circular economy, and we have a fund with an open grant round that does that on a regular basis. And then the second strand, before I come to the biodiversity focus, is around supporting the infrastructure of NGOs. So we're always trying to think and listen to NGOs and civil society as they try and go about their work. And as people are so aware in the room, many of the NGOs that worked in this space have been really under-resourced for many years. And suddenly they're being asked to come to the table to scale up very quickly without necessarily the resources that they need to do that. So we've been trying to support where we've been asked around developing the campaigning capacity and capability of those organisations so they can be at COP, so they can really challenge government around the commitments they've made. Or an example is the Citizens' Assembly on biodiversity, where the groups are trying to really amplify the discussions from the Citizens' Assembly and take that opportunity to try and raise awareness and change mindsets. So that's some of the work that we're trying to do under Sustainable Futures. And then in terms of biodiversity, I suppose that's probably for us where the most exciting work to date has happened. And we've had, I suppose, stronger partnerships in that regard. Our observations, and it's no secret to anybody in this room again, and it came up in our discussions, just that, you know, as a country we do have the Climate Action Bill, but there is no equivalent legislation in terms of the loss of plants and trees and wildlife. And even though people are waking up, and not people in this room, but people are waking up to the challenge of biodiversity, but not necessarily, I think, in terms of our own donors and our grantees, to the same way as they have around the broader climate justice issues. But again, I suppose really having the ambition to do that. So for 3 years then, we have worked with National Parks and Wildlife Service to try and increase and support those who are protecting nature. And we've seen some amazing, innovative work, very similar to what we've heard today. So again, some examples: citizen sciences, having the tools to conduct a national bat survey. Peatlands with endangered species been protected through work that's resourced. The production of birdwatching guides, nesting programs, all becoming a reality through the programme. But now I think the most important thing for us has been the work with ourselves and government around trying to support the development of local biodiversity action plans. And so really where that has worked is where an ecologist is working with a local network or group, some individuals from community, local landowners, farmers, experts come together and work with an ecologist as they map the biodiversity in the area and identify some of those shortfalls, really look at the danger points and the potential intervention points, and then formulate an action plan. So that's been phase one. It was slightly delayed because of COVID, like much else, but have really kind of accelerated now. And then the second part is where those plans are submitted for funding around implementation. So that's a match fund partnership as well. And as I said, it's a partnership with the National Parks Wildlife Service. It's 3 years old. And then the Minister of State, Malcolm Newland, at the part of the National Biodiversity Conference, confirmed it for another 5 years, which we were really, really delighted with. So 45 local areas now have biodiversity plans, action plans, and there's a further 89 on the way to be completed. And so that is fantastic to have that mapping with the support and expertise of ecologists throughout the country. And what we really want to do now is to work with the National Biodiversity Data Centre in the brilliant work that they do, is to try and bring that all together and to have a centre of excellence that can really show what's happening in the promising practice that's been done. And again, we were talking about it at our group, the how, to provide some access and information in the brilliant way that they do to the how, and then we may try and map over time the impact that it's having. So really delighted, I suppose, with the opportunity to work with them on that. And again, I suppose our ambition is to try and bring more and more to the table. So every time we go out on a grant round, we never have enough resources. There's always more applications. So in that regard, we do the open grant round, we score them, we mark them, and then any additional proposals, we go to our donor base and say, is this something that you might be interested in? There's actually an open grant round at the moment for anybody who's interested. There's 2 strands to it. It is that mapping and then the implementation of the plans, and people can submit as many times as they want. And we'll be doing that over the next 5 years. But we are seeing more and more people and come to the table and want to know where their partnership or investment might make a difference. And so, for example, AXA Parks last year gave $1 million around green spaces, and we worked with them with the design of the application process, but really wanted them to think about the local projects in consultation with local partners and with a biodiversity lens and an ecologist really informing the distribution of that funding. So that's where we're at. Our ambition is to keep going with those projects around, particularly around the Biodiversity Fund, and to learn more and more and to try and gather and support promising practice and then the data and the sharing of that information. But our ambition also is to try and bring as many people as we can to the table to really increase and grow philanthropy in Ireland, but philanthropy in Ireland in this context. And for us, it is about us changing our ambition, as I said, not having areas that we work in, but actually having it all under this lens and trying to support others to do the same. So the NGOs that we work with would often say, look, it's on my radar, but we're too busy, we don't know what to do, and we've no funding to apply the thinking and the lens that we need to think of child rights through this lens, or women's rights through this lens, or housing, or health, all the issues that are so integrated and interlinked. And that's what we hope to do next year as well. So philanthropy, you know, if it's mission-driven philanthropy, it has the capacity, as I said, to invest its capability and its assets into areas to develop and support partnerships and there's many partnerships that can be supported. So that's our commitment from the Community Foundation to Ireland, is to up our own game and to try and bring others to the table as well. So very appreciative of letting me crash your conference today, and just fantastic to hear all, as I said, the promising practice that was outlined. Thank you very much. Gur Maithfidh.